should be at the back of my head.
Let me sit over there, Heath, so people can't see me with my ball cap.
You got a mask.
Yeah, they won't.
One of them.
July 15, 2020 emergency call meeting of the Camden County Board of Education for purpose of information updates, discussion, and approval of the re-entry. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Carroll.
We're going to turn it over to Mr. Re-entry team.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Tonight, we come to you to present to you the Camden County Schools Return to Learn plan that we included who was on the team, and our responsibility was to design a re-entry plan for our students and staff with the guidance from the state that included specific procedures and operations to ensure our schools take the necessary precautions to do our part to control the spread of COVID-19. For state requirements, the team performed a deep dive from the Department of Health and Human Services toolkit and also the Lighting Our Way Forward document provided by the state of North Carolina. After much discussion and collaboration, we have designed a plan that you have in front of you tonight. Our number one priority as a team is that our plan ensures that and well-being of each and every student and staff. We feel that this plan exhibits so. On yesterday, Governor Cooper informed the state of which plan we should implement, in which there were options A, Plan A, which was in-person learning for all students with enhanced health protocols. Plan B was blended learning, in-person and remote learning with no more than 50% of the students in the facility with enhanced health protocols. And then Plan C, which is the remote learning for all students. As we all know, Governor Cooper informed us we are to implement Plan B. In-person learning will occur with social and physical distancing and enhanced health and safety protocols. K-12 students will experience a combination of in-person learning in the school building with their teachers and classmates and online instruction through an online platform. The model we present tonight includes the creation of two groups, Group A and Group B, that attend school on 2 consecutive days and stay remote learning. And you can find that structure on the page that look with all the colors on it. It looks like this. So our model details Group A receive in-person learning on Monday and Tuesday, and Group B receives in-person learning on Thursday and Friday. Remote learning day for all. While Group A is engaged in in-person learning on Monday and Tuesday, Group B will be working remotely. And then while Group B is engaged in in-person learning on Thursday and Friday, Group A will be working remotely. Both learning environments will have high expectations and will result in work that contributes to the success of the students' overall grade. Teachers will strategically place learning opportunities in each environment to create an overall experience that aligns with the rigorous state standards for the grade level or course. Experiences during online instruction will be a combination of recorded, live instructional sessions and student work packets for those students who do not have internet access. To address families who have multiple children in our district, those students will be assigned to the same group. With direction from the state now, we as a district can move forward with planning, and we know that we have. At this time, before I move into transportation,
Discuss it as we go through the plan or save it all to the end. I think I've got some on the model and scheduling.
all right. Health screenings and responsibilities. Daily health screenings will be implemented at all schools. We're asking that parents in the morning screen their kids by taking their temperature. And if they are informed, the bus driver, on the notes right here. Face coverings are required on the bus for all students unless they cannot tolerate it due to developmental, medical, or behavior health needs. Face covering must remain socially distanced. Once students arrive at school, students will be asked before they enter. we will ask them the symptom screening checklist questions, and they will have their temperature taken. Parents must stay until the child, we're asking that either the parent or responsible adult be with them just in case they don't pass the screening. If they come to the bus and they're sick, we ask that parents wait for this before they go to the bus. Yes.
What about the parents that just completely disregard that and don't show up at the bus with their child?
That was a sale. But we did say that we have to get a phone call, call the school, call the parent. That's a question that we have to
Because it's gonna
answer.
happen. It's gonna- If the bus driver screams his child and their temperature is 101.7, and then we're gonna put that child on the bus and take that child to the school. I'm just saying, I'm not beating you up. This is gonna happen. And
If I may add, just from a liability perspective, I see more liability from leaving child, obviously, than putting them on the bus. You've already got students spread out, just shifting the students around, putting that student at the front of the bus, taking them to school, have them step off, contact with the parent.
To make sure they have a mask.
Yeah. If they have a mask, even if they are, even if they do have COVID, then that does.
I leave the child on this is gonna happen.
Yes.
And the screening on the beginning of the bus does not include a temperature check.
Really?
We discussed that, and it was the responsibility that on the bus. But it may make the routes longer. That's why we ask parents to do tests.
One more thing to think about. There are tons of families that don't have a thermometer. And they're not easy to come by right now.
Or holding up traffic, or any number of other things to check temperatures at the bus.
Yeah, I don't think the bus driver could do it. Maybe we have to put an extra person in the bus driver.
Now in the heat, even one of my patients that comes out of the car and waits at the door before I let them in, their temperature will read 117. After you let them, what I do is I bring them in, they have on a mask, I sit them away, let them sit.
Now this is all we can do about the state.
Well, I'm just,
It's either we don't do anything and wait till the end of school, or we try and do what we can. It's a bad situation either way we go. This is, you have to make some kind of,
but the medical side of me has to ask you these questions. I'm not beating you up, Lamar. I love you. I think you're great.
Yes, ma'am.
That's
But
kind of what we landed on today.
beat you up because you are obviously a wonderful person. I live up here.
Thank you. Students who leave and return to campus during the day, since they've already been screened and passed the screening, we will develop some type of pass. Because we do have kids that go to appointments for the day, they come back, and so we give them that pass. Get back in. Diagnosis, exposure, or illness. This came directly from the state. They gave us specific instructions on how if they test positive. The contact tracing is going to be instrumental in our special education students. We know that this may require some modifications for them, and so some of those modifications may be assign a known employee to always screen them. And we will, and also parent for those non-local students, we will ask their parent to complete an attestation form or be available at drop off. They can't just drop off. Face coverings are expected to follow cloth face covering guidelines. And recognize that some parents and students with complex medical needs will have additional concerns. Students with disabilities and employees will work with personal protective equipment will be utilized by the employee. We're enforcing hand washing. Maintaining healthy spaces. It talks about face coverings. All students, and that changed. At first, it was middle school grade week to kindergarten students through 12th grade. Maintain healthy spaces. Hand washings at the entrances of our buildings, in the cafeteria, and front entrance and exits. And we talked about classrooms, but we never.
Right, and what we'll be doing for classrooms will be more of the, I guess, portable hand sanitizer that the teacher can dispense rather than the actual, well, the school system is going to provide that to the schools. Yeah.
Social distancing, and this part talks about signage in the buildings. They recommend that we put signage on the walls, on the floor to remind students of social distancing practices, changes to foot traffic flow in buildings and on campus pathways, furniture placement in classrooms, and much more. Signage on the floors, we kind of talk about how that will look different at every school. They're asking the custodians to perform the duties outlined here, sweeping, clean and disinfect hallway fountain, spaces where kids go. They ask to limit visitors to the building. If they absolutely have to come in the building, they have to go to the symptoms check and also have their temperature taken. Water fountains. We talk about kids to bring water bottles. They have cups for those who don't have water bottles.
Do the visitors have to wear a mask when they come in?
Yes, I'm sorry. Visitors do have to wear a mask when they come in. Transportation. Transportation was a big conversation for us. And so we said to promote social distancing, no more than one student will be seated on the school bus seat at a time. Exceptions can be made for family members. Face coverings are required on the bus. Hand sanitizer will be available on the bus and the bus will give out the hand sanitizer to each after the morning run and the afternoon. Cafeteria. Cafeterias, we decided they would be closed. And students would eat in their classrooms. Athletics or co-curricular activities, so we're waiting for that information. And after-school programs are not running at this.
And then as we move forward in numbers to one increase or decrease, they can make a good decision as of September 1st. September 1st for competition or together workouts, that continue, but the actual competition. will not be privacy. Unless something else.
Sorry. You were up, Amber.
I don't, so I can't do it. James is on his way, I didn't go back up.
I'm sorry? That's fine. Filter all your germs coming in.
Oh, wait.
You like it? It's filtering the germs. Clear.
Y'all ready?
We're ready.
Hold it on.
I guess,
Amber, we'll take turn.
right. 1, 2, 3.
All right, and the last part of this is the social and emotional health portion of the plan. We are going to make sure that we take care of age-appropriate information to students and correct misinformation, reassure students that they are safe and that adults are working to keep them safe, emphasize ways children and families can be germ busters and reduce the spread of the illness, try to keep routines as normal as possible and limit the amount of exposure and reduce the spread of the illness, try to keep routines as normal as possible and limit the amount of exposure to television and social media regarding COVID-19, just to keep them calm and safe space. And the last portion of the plan is just some resources. It's our calendar. We ask them to stay connected to the schools, making sure that the numbers are updated and addresses are updated throughout the year. And we just provide resources to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and also the CDC. So that is the plan, our return to learn plan for Candy County.
Do you all want Ms. Anderson to present the remote learning piece of this, or ask questions about this first and then let her?
Yeah, I've got some questions here specific. I've got some about the remote learning, but I figured I would probably better your half of it. Any discussion on staggering out start times for the different schools?
Was brief conversation about that. We didn't go into a deep conversation about it. But definitely time.
Have the kids that they go also. Some of the
Segregated more in South End, so they're all, crisscross, but just wondering, 'cause I'm keeping them as close as they start now. I don't think What about for early release? If Group B is always the Friday in school, are we maybe flipping after the first semester so that, you know, the same kids are on?
So in our last board meeting, that was one of the things that we approved and addressed in the calendar adjustment. We took all of the Friday early release days. Let's say there was one on September 25th, and we dragged that to Wednesday, the 23rd. So that our plan was to still have the early release, but students would be at home remote learning, and teachers would just stop being available at 11:30 that day. Still on the B, move those to and I think the work days, without counting those, Ms. Lane and I talked about that quite a bit, and I think it equals out between the holidays that fall on Mondays and then the work days that fall on the weekend. I think it was equal, I can't remember, but it was really, really close.
Chris, can I piggyback on that? So, as far as the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday groups, this may cross over some with Sanderson. Is the flow of learning the same that week? So, teacher starts lesson on Monday, lesson continues through the week? Or does he or she start the same thing on Monday for that group, it has the same thing on Thursday and Friday for group B?
That's a question I was holding to with Anderson, that exact same one, is the in-person instruction, is it gonna be the same for the week for both groups?
Yes.
Yes. So,
But it's gonna be it's gonna be delayed, and here's how I discuss that with someone. So if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching my group A students on Monday and Tuesday, and then they are remote learning on Wednesday of the following week, if that makes sense.
So the same teacher will have kids in group A and B, so those kids will be in that same environment.
So as A, and half of those students will be identified as B, was to reduce the number of students in the school building by 50%.
Right.
To allow for social distancing and such things. So it's always going to be cycling. So the same lesson will be taught in the week, but then while the group B students, teacher's going to be teaching a new lesson to the group A students. If that makes sense.
so group A students, minuscule grand scheme, group A students are going to have.
Monday and Tuesday, the group B students will get on Thursday and Friday.
Right, so by the end of the semester.
It doesn't.
I know what you're getting at. I think at the end of the semester, there's a time built in.
With that cutoff, that group A started at the beginning of the week. If group B started at the end of the week or so. At that cutoff day, their running either stops prematurely, they don't get the same 2 days, 3 days, group A get off. Unless they will continue 2 or 3 more days. So in essence, group A should be at 2 free days.
Okay, so if the second, if first semester ends on, let's use real, this is asked. So the first semester ends on January 15th. Let's just assume that we remain in Plan B all the way through first semester, okay? For the purpose of answering this question. On that week in January, Group A is going to get new instruction to remote learn. Those students will get, Group B students will get that same lesson on the 14th and 15th. What they won't get is the first 3 days of the next week to do the remote learning. So the teachers will have to, and curriculum people feel free to rescue me if you'd like.
You gotta look at it as a week. So in this Meads class, 1 week of instruction, 9 of her students are gonna get remote learning. So that Thursday, Friday group, first day of school can be write all about me in Google Classroom and send it your way. Now gets that they did not do. So we're looking at it as in 1 week period, here's the direct instruction that also Monday and Tuesday's gonna get direct first, and remote second. Thursday and Friday's gonna get remote first and direct second. So we're looking at more skill-based week to week to week.
So just go to week 2. Remote learning is going to start potentially a new lesson. That week, virtual learning.
Right.
So
So
now
now
if
if
you're
you,
not at a disadvantage than the in-classroom,
it won't be.
I think it depends on your grade level.
It does.
If you're in a high school math class, you have to have that continuous building of your
Right.
lessons. So, I'm happy with math. So not a
The math too is everybody's question. It's like, can you get the whole curriculum in, like, I'm thinking of like high school level, like math too, but not really, so.
Weeks to teach math 5 days a week. The way we're set now, they're only gonna get 12 weeks and 2 days a week for instruction, for new instruction.
But teachers don't provide new instruction every week.
Please, no.
That takes 12 weeks to teach or whatever it is. In a semester, it's actually 18 weeks, right? So 18 weeks in a semester to teach math. These students are getting 5 days a week. So to all the students.
It wouldn't be judging. Because the kids would only be with the teacher 2 days out of the week.
Now, one reality math to classroom. There's
Probably more than 2 days.
There, more than 2, yeah. She talked about teaching every day. She said she would still be teaching new material, and that may be through recorded or Facebook Live or Zoom or something like that. So that's another day it's going to be recouped for all the students. That's something to understand that.
So is the virtual learning day on Wednesday, is the purpose of the groups?
It was multiple reasons. Because this is gonna take a lot of planning on teachers. And then they can use that day to kind of deal with Group A. Gonna start with Group B, design some, record videos, get lessons ready for the next week. For the next group.
And do that while still responding to
Yes.
students remotely. Was like A day, if I'm an A group student, I come on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays this week. And then if I am a B group, I come on Tuesdays and Thursdays a week, and 2 days in person the next. The concern that a number of teachers on the reentry team, they talked in detail, I think, increased amount of planning that comes from formats. Because now they're doing what they used to do 5 days a week in the classroom, and these are sort of their words. Plus, they're doing what they did last year in the spring semester, remotely. So they talked about how the planning for those two are very different.
I got a question. Do y'all consider maybe this live streaming class is carried on like a normal class? Like, so for A's in there, but you're live streaming the B2, so they're
Maybe Ms. Anderson's group might have talked about that. We did.
maybe like a math 2, math 3, one where that could help or be more beneficial. Then the teacher could just teach on their normal schedule, just like they're having a normal class in front of them.
Actually, I believe that's good. See any harm in live streaming anyway, if students could log in those first days.
It is a mediation for 10 minutes, just in case some of them may have missed the stream. Teach just like a normal curriculum on a normal flow. And I have to reteach the same thing.
That actually wasn't it. This plan has not attached to the plan that Ms. Anderson is going to present yet. That's going to happen after, because we just finalized these plans today.
Yes.
So they're going to connect and see how that overlaps and might change some of this. So those kinds of things could very well come out of that plan that infused into this plan.
For moving on to school bus, health screening requirements, et cetera, the attestation forms, are the schools going to provide them?
But then we also have some who will print them at the school and give it to the students.
And just to confirm, if they're dropped off by a parent, there's no attestation form needed, they'll just get the screening when they get to Sissy's medical side of things here for a make her happy. Return to school after diagnosis, exposure, illness, et cetera, who have experienced the things and so is a new cough. During cold season, all the time. If they develop a new cough and they go and they're tested and it's negative 10 days from the time they develop that new cough, kindergartners are walking around hacking pretty much from the end of November through about the 1st of April. Just want to make sure we're not safe.
Above the school bus health screening
Yeah,
requirement,
the list of
health
symptoms.
screening responsibility.
So, if you've experienced one of these symptoms, et cetera, diarrhea, vomiting should be a normal, don't bring your kid to school during that particular time of year.
And then you have asthmatic, but the weather might so long through.
So, a great question, if it's a cough, I mean, is it a new cough, is it from asthma, is it just from, they just went down the wrong pipe, that kind of thing. So, I'm probably work with our nurse.
I'm on Facebook Live, I'm not going to talk about the state of GPI right now. It's their plan, but there's, again, a kindergartner, first grader that gets a cough during cold season, and they go and their parents are willing to have them tested, and it comes back negative. Should we really be keeping an eye out for the State School Board Association and checking into that kind of language at deep behind the state?
Are you talking about specifically the new cough
That's a
symptom
very
or
vague- Yes, the new cough. The others, you shouldn't, children should be come to school with any of those other things anyway, just in our normal healthcare policy. New cough is just so vague, and there's so many reasons to be done, especially for parents willing to go get the test done and it comes back negative. But we still have to have them out 10 days since they first had the symptoms.
So maybe one of the things we would do, Mr. Mazzell, whether the new cough should be a standalone symptom, or if it's tied to one of the others.
And just,
Well, the guidelines right now say one.
And maybe that's something we need to bring up to SBE or DPI or somebody and say, hey, this is a contention, and, can you clarify this?
for fun, and I apologize that I have a hat on. For fun, I didn't know. So just, we're not thinking about everybody that's gonna be asymptomatic. So that's another knife in the tire.
Symptomatic, how do you know?
Drivers, are we gonna ask them to physically take those forms and check them, or can the students show them the forms higher levels here? Bus driver doesn't need to be touching a piece of paper. It should be contaminated. I know it's ridiculous, I'm not saying it's.
Everything.
To the bus coordinator, assistant principal at the schools, and we keep them at the school. Conversation, if we just show it to get on the bus.
It seems easier for the driver almost, since he brings that up, to just have the kid.
Is that a formalized form provided by the school, or is it just a written?
We'll give them, middle school will give them to them at school, in the homeroom, and we give them like 10. And then
When they
kind
get
of,
loaded, they get more.
yes.
So on the bus topic too. We cannot. So it's funny, we can require a student to wear a mask, but there are also exceptions. If a student gets on the bus without a mask, we have to socially distance. Those seats are about 30 to 40 inches apart from center. I'm curious, with the capacity that we're gonna have with 50% of the population, the normal bus load that we're gonna expect, like how many students are we gonna be able to fit on that bus? Are we gonna be able to accommodate all the students who ride a bus if we've got, say, 5 or 6 kids who get on the bus? Let's just say they have asthma, and the parents aren't gonna require them to wear a mask. So you've got 6 times 36 feet. That's not even quite right. That's just more. So I mean, you're talking about 6 kids on the bus. You're talking about every other seat.
Just for fun.
Is not wearing masks. And you take that 42 capacity bus
Hey,
and cut it down to 6 or 7.
I'm on your side, buddy.
And if we gotta account for that,
Ms. Dave, before you stop it, you might want to announce it. Go back to.
Y'all, I think y'all can hear me well. So the link is working Facebook Live. So get out of these people way. I'm gonna take Facebook Live off. Thank you.
and I'm not beating anybody up either, because I know it's just the best we got. Best we got to work with.
So we will have to look at how we group students, and also, what parents are not gonna say, we're gonna say, my child's not wearing a mask. And they'll talk about how we handle it.
I have a question as far as meals are concerned.
Great question.
That didn't come
That didn't come up.
Ms. Lee's working on it. Andrew Lee's working on it.
taking care of the diabetes? Or is she gonna be in this room with a child that has the potential to be very ill for this child? It takes a good bit to put that in. That's nothing that can be done quickly. And so, you know, who knows how often this is gonna happen? Who's gonna be with that sick child, with a diabetic child that might be, having a crash in blood sugar? Another thought is that this nurse is gonna be exposed every day but Wednesday. What about when your nurse is sick? And she's out for 2 weeks? And then what about when your principals are sick and your vice principals? I'm just, and as far as,
So we talked about a lot of paths that we went down. And it kind of brought us around to, should we be sitting here talking about why we should implement? Because here's what we know 100% for sure. We're going to discover 50 things that we did.
that's right.
Because there is no possible way, to answer your question specifically, what was about every school, right? And because nurse caring for a diabetic child and caring for a child whose potential nurse has, we talked about with that COVID response team, do you pull all of the DC assistant, the assistant principal, administrative staff, everyone who's not standing before students in a classroom, and go wait with the positive student, and then gets there to pick them up. So we talked about a lot of that, and with a medical professional and of different, not with an answer to some of it.
We're nights where you're tired. We have Sally who's coughing, okay? But maybe she has exercise and she isn't feeling well. She's feeling tired with a kid with a fever, and he only has strep throat and has a fever and a cough. And now you contaminate both those kids' space. So
System or DPI plan for every contingency of
Telling you
I know
what's
they
gonna
will,
happen.
so people, what I'm saying is, act responsible choices or not, because if we're going down that wormhole, we can get in all kinds of things. We have no more in between the ride from Bartlett's Landing, as well as I do from the medical side, they're going into the season. We're not gonna be talking about what. If they left the house with a fever that high, they should be bringing them to school. They got COVID, the other ones got strep throat, whatever.
some people have a weather.
They should never show up to school.
Okay, so
In the best interest
my goal is
of the overall public.
and putting
We're
that.
there, we know that see, but they've given us option B to work.
Here's
with
the
and
point, I can make any point that I want to.
Going on the same thing, but we may decide that we can't do it. But right now, we need to finish hearing what they've got to say about what they have come up with.
That you are thinking about,
Yes.
okay? Because that's something that's gonna happen, will.
Oh, we all know that.
And the children will also be left at school. Not all parents are in Virginia, and it might take 2 hours looking at this big picture. And yes, I am a medical person, and you don't have to agree with me. There's no perfect plan. But those are the questions that I have.
Gotcha.
I got a question, since we're talking about B and C now, or it's at least in the mix. What was the poll result? What did the parents?
Let's stop the questions right here, and let Ms. Anderson.
Was it half?
make her-
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
She has to do her presentation.
This is not correct, you know that, right? Huh?
If I go back to Facebook
As long
Live,
as you don't put it in my.
then that's for sure. I'm just, people's demand, people. All right. So let me see. Well, people are messing.
Can they not hear or what?
I don't know. They're just asking me to please go back to Facebook. I don't know what's going on.
It's freezing
I
out.
think it's buffering and freezing up, so they're.
I think they'll be able to
I
watch
actually
it
think it was
again.
my directing skills that were like, oh, you were the producer, I was the. Maybe I have a future. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah. The remote instruction plan with you. I would like to start by acknowledging the members of our team. They've done some really great work. We had Catherine Woodward, Lisa Byram, Timothy Lazar, Sean Lynham, Cindy Spruill, David Griffiths, Catherine Ford, Freshwater, Tajma Lassiter, who's here with me tonight, and myself. So I wanted to notice that the early college is information that we received from Mrs. Lane's department later, so that's why their names are not. First start with 15 remote instructors was infused in our plan. And the reason for this was every teacher throughout the United States had to just figure out how to provide learning for students, ensuring that there were clear expectations to be turned in. And so district has a clear plan of providing remote initially. The remote 5 days have been interwoven into our current calendar. However, if every Wednesday will be a remote. We're going to go over those 15 components. Not to quickly look at the instruction plans, I would like to note that our team have met 3 times, and they are actually finally, and then I will be working to submit the plan for Camden County. We'll look at the virtual school. Component 1, Camden, which is consulting with our stakeholders, survey information to get feedback on their experience with remote. So reached out to several parents just to find out. So component 1 is something that we're doing for teachers, and that's really important. We want to provide remote instruction at ensuring that our teachers are familiar with using the 2 platforms that we campus. Component roles and expectations. So on the remote learning day, faculty had a clear vision, actually worked to provide that information so that teachers, you were clear on what the expectations would be on those remote, and sent out surveys to our families. And in our surveys, we wanted to also need was for our county access is just a way to still provide access for those students. We have to look at that option for some students when on to component 5 through 8. Following up with our library, so those are some things that we're looking at with our community partners. Component 7 here will be done when TDLCs on those the days where they are able to meet together to do that. Component 8, one thing that DPS to students that they actually have a learning target. So that will be expected of them on that particular. Components 9 through 12. This here ensures that we are following the standard course of study. Component 10. This was a huge one. This one dealt with our students with disabilities and our students who have 504s.
During our EC director worked really hard, that was based on their IEP. Our teachers were actually meeting one-on-one with students or in small groups, as well as our speech and language pathologist and our occupational therapist. So everyone really worked together to figure out how to really meet the needs. Component 10 is something that the state is really making sure to meet their service delivery. So another major area, attendance. In the spring, we could, but for this 2021 school year, it's imperative that Valerie J. Cox, our chief data manager, in the system by 10 o'clock. So parents that every day that each school will create discussion about that. We understand that parents are working to set clear expectations and guidelines for what we do it whenever you get a chance, then our attendance will not be accurate to our families prior to school. So submit it for the online. Each school will be responsible for answering questions if the teacher is unavailable. Are aware that that person will have to be available during the remote learning days. Component 13 also looks at technology support, which is just as similar as component. We also ensure that we're meeting the needs of our English learners, because throughout the state of our different subgroups. And that verbiage to show how to meet the needs of the students. Now, of course, at each grade level, that will vary. At the high school versus in an and then finally, component 15 was just for the team to look at limitations that we may have seen, and that was all the information that our team had to first digest, which was a lot, but we're thankful. So what we're going to just kind of talk about now, I want to make sure that we're very clear that the remote instruction plan is really a guide for our parents and our students, meaning elementary remote instruction plan for my child, and I will know dojo, we're going to offer, or how to use Canvas, because some of those systems much information, but at the same time, make sure that our families. So I am not going to the elementary plan is the one that I actually included in this document, but for both schools, you will see information about when assignments will be posted, when assignments are due. It talks about paper packets. The Google Classroom will be able to learn more about how to use that. We also will be including information about grading. And then again, as I mentioned in the components, there will be information for families regarding attendance, and just overall communicating with what to do as a team. Instead of having one remote instruction, we actually broke it up into 3 plans. So there was an elementary plan, K6, have a high school plan, which is 9. The information will be taught with their team. They're looking at for worth of work, because what they were finding in the spring, and then another teacher things done. So throughout our system. Are there any plan? Again, everyone is following the same template in their individual schools.
Is keeping the uniform
Right.
and consistent, and a strong emphasis.
Is there an monitor what's happening with individual teachers? All of my kindergarten teachers spend X amount of. Right.
You can do those checks in there. But again, then I really want expectations are. There were a lot of questions in the spring, this much work from this teacher, not as much from this teacher, what we're expecting. And again, it will vary by school, but the parent, it's just like if this is my Zell, maybe you're 6 or 9, 5 days face to face. It's done and then it's accurate. You can set it, there's different features that you can go to access.
Certain cell only someone could, I know that kids, they go in and delete a kid's name that's annoying, like the kid was
Right.
prepared to be there that morning. from happening.
Yes, and then each will be form for all kindergartners. And then the parent may do it by class. So every school will design it.
Have internet access. How will you parent?
We talked about parent would need to call to the front office. At first, we thought about the teacher, but the teacher just may not be available. So we would alert the front office that you would have phone calls from parents who don't have access to be able to make sure that their kid is marked present. But yes, that was a question that we had.
And this plan, I guess this is all inclusive of the remote learning for the part-time, Plan B students and the 100%.
Yes, so this plan is doable whether we're doing Plan B or Plan C.
And it also applies to, even if we do Plan B, if that's what we're doing, because the parents that do choose that they want to do 100%,
Correct.
it all falls under this. whether it
Yes,
be-
so this plan would cover all of that.
Okay. I was just making sure this wasn't like just for the 100% people.
No,
Just for
it's for Plan B, Plan C, or 100%.
How much of the online will be live instruction? You know, Ms. Meads' first period class, she's teaching them live via Zoom. You know, all of them together, so she's not overloaded with all the kids trying to get it once. But how much is going to be the balance maybe between recorded, live face-to-face, and, you know, Google Classroom assignment, handout type material?
And that information, that was not a part, we're the district team, so we're looking big picture, but that's a great.
Come up with it.
Yeah, so
Okay,
each school will come up with that.
Okay.
We didn't want to take away the teachers' autonomy. PLC meetings, they'll be able to discuss how much Zoom time would they, do with their students, or how much direct instruction. So each individual school will do that.
And that's part of what I meant as far as being consistent from teacher to teacher. Everybody being held to the same count. Just one teacher saying, hey, I'm going to do an hour of face-to-face, and
Right.
another one is doing 2 hours.
As a matter of fact, Dr. Banks, for the teacher expectations, our team, we actually have it outlined that they would have to do 2 hours of the virtual direct instruction. So it's outlined for teachers. So every teacher will be expected to do that. Our principals will have to hold them accountable for that.
Devices for students. When are we going to start getting that information out there so that we'll be ready?
We'll have to do that very soon. We don't have much time, but yes, that's a good point. Mr. Mizell, did your team talk about devices?
We can talk about devices. I just, from my perspective, I just thought about how I could get it out. They were given the first week they come to school, because we're going to assign them one Chromebook, one student. We're not going to have, we normally keep them in the room, but we want to assign a kid a Chromebook, and that's their Chromebook for the year. If they need it at home, they can check it out.
Well, a concern that I've heard, if a family only has one device, they've got 2 kids, 3, whatever, and they both have virtual learning at the same time, both of them can't use the same device at the same time.
As a school, we discussed that, and we're prepared to check out the Chromebooks as needed.
And one of the questions in your survey that went out was, do you have an individual, and you can read the exact question, but something to the effect of, is there an individual device for each individual child in your house?
Yes.
We got the district, I guess we got a Chromebook to hand out to every child that would different people.
For every child that would need one, some people are going to use the ones they have already, but we have enough for the students who might not have access to one at home. Or, like Dr. Banks said, you've got 3 children in your home, you have one, we could provide 2.
That's what we did last
spring.
spring.
That's what I was
Yes.
gonna say. How would it look like last spring as
Same.
far as?
If they needed a device, they would go to the individual schools. We actually had times allotted, and the parent would go to Brandy or CMS and get the device if they need it, and that worked out fine.
We actually got very little negative feedback about in the spring. So, if there's something that you all are aware of that we might not, we just make sure that you let them know that.
And Joe and James, I don't know if James is here, but they did a great job of checking the devices and really helping with that entire process, so we can ensure that that happens again.
How much longer is the survey live before it's going to wrap up and y'all can, I know you've probably gone through what you've gotten so far, but before you're comfortable that everyone who's going to do it has done it and put together a
For my team, we're satisfied with our results. And so we work to infuse the feedback that we received into our plan. So we're done at this point. The next thing that we're really focusing on, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Purcell, is the virtual learning option, because we will now need to follow up with families who are not going back to school. So I know that surveys would be a great mission, but I also wanted to share the possibility of us having an application. And the application would allow the family to make a decision on whether or not they wanted to have their child 100% online. From there, we would get the applications back, and we will be able to determine the number of students that would be a part of this virtual learning, and then we'd have to also look at staffing this as well. So that was the other piece that I wanted us to discuss tonight.
Do we have any preliminary numbers as far
Yeah, I
as
was gonna say, how far, you're comfortable, Mr. Mizell, how comfortable are you with what you've received so far that you might can aggregate the data for us by the board meeting or just email out to us so we can kind of see where we're standing?
Right now, we have 1,123 responses, and that's per child. With 1,900 students, that's missing about 700, 700.
How does that fall out? What percentage of those want to do 100%? You have that.
That was 18% right now. Actually, that's 212 kids.
But this application that Ms. Anderson is talking about is more specific. It actually asks the parent to complete one application per child of their own, in their own, and it commits them to remote.
For at
For the
least a
first
semester, so they wouldn't be able to start it and then
So if you
stop.
sign up, you commit.
Because we have to plan for that, staff that. So the example that I used, sorry, Mr. Lazar, but the example I used was if Mr. Lazar has 20 first graders or 18 first graders who want to participate in remote learning, then he's going to assign one of his first grade teachers to be that classroom teacher and teach 100% online.
How would that work with my calculus class? You've got one teacher that can teach it. Let's say 5 kids in that classroom is 100% remote.
It's
the other
going to
15 won't.
quite differently, and it's going to involve things like NCBPS, some of our Apex learning courses that we take advantage of, and some of that, because you're right, it looks very different in high school.
And then also with the high school, with some of the elective courses that they have, some of them may not be an option. And so we would have to have that clearly outlined in the application that some courses may not be possible for your child. So again, when we talked about this in our meeting today, every school will look differently. We talked about at the high school level, for sure, trying to figure out how to make this happen. But one thing we have to take into account that Ms. Overton has done really great work in getting our schedules for kids completed. And so if we're going to do this virtual learning, then we would need to get those applications out ASAP. Right, Ms. Davis? Yeah. So, because that's going to change her entire
Yeah, that was
schedule.
gonna be my follow-up question is, do you have it ready to go and how quickly are you planning on getting that out? Because
We have one that we've seen in another district and we really like it. So what we will do is make it work for Camden, but we can have that ready to go within a matter of a day or two to get it out. And then we'd have to have at the district level, we can start looking at the numbers and how many teachers we would need to fill this, make this happen.
And if I may say one more thing about the commitment, the main reason for that is, let's go back to that first grade example. If 20 students or 18 students want that, we provide a teacher for that, provide the resources for that, and then 10 of those students, 10 of those parents change their mind and send their child to Brandy, then who's going to teach them? Because we still are held, as of right now, unless Dr. Berry tells me I'm wrong, we're still held to the class size mandates.
You are not.
Okay. And so then we bring 10 students back in face to face. Where do we put them? Because we can't put them in a classroom, a physical classroom with a teacher, because then we're over the limit on class size requirements, and then that gets us all in hot water, or hiring another teacher. which of course is a budgetary issue. So it just kind of, that's
What hard
the
deadline
reason.
would you be looking at for the commitment? Just rough guessing, because it's obviously we need to get that from social media, telephone calls, everything, to make sure people know it.
We would have to give them maybe a week, week and a half, because we're at about 4 weeks before kids are back. And so they wouldn't have a month to figure it out, but once they make that commitment, it would have to stand.
What about the opposite? What about somebody?
You know, say they have.
Schools that wants to go remote, and change their mind.
We've talked about that, and I've asked that question. Colleagues that have not gotten an answer yet. Whether they could go, if they can't go this way, can they go the other way and go remote? And the general feeling is that they would be able to go remote, but we have to figure that out. What we really need to do is have commitment for at least the first semester from every parent as to what they want to do with their child. And I honestly, I believe that parents have probably already been talking quite a bit about this, about whether or not they want to send their students back to school or not.
Knowing they're locked in, though, I think they may affect whether they pick 100% remote. If they can't, once they select that, that's it.
Right.
They can change the number. And plus how attractive you make the remote look. Like, I think if you can make it attractive enough where it's like, where we can live stream the class, at least at the high school level, where I think you could get more people to buy into that. Because then it's like their kids. I don't know if that's possible, but I think it's worth looking into.
Well, they're really,
Plus they can help with your calendar problem too, because then those 100% 5 kids that want to be remote, they can just watch the same thing at their own class.
there's several parts. First, we want to retain our students. We want to keep our students in our school system, students to other online options, obviously.
Right.
And then, but then we also have to take the health and safety of individual students, because some students do have legitimate health concerns about being exposed. And so those parents have a legitimate concern, and we feel like we owe them, and the governor stated yesterday that we would provide for them an opportunity for 100% remote learning. Where it gets a little bit gray is the parent who's not, who might be thinking, okay, I have a healthy student, but I kind of want to send them back to school, but I'm maybe a little bit afraid. And those are the ones that will have to make a judgment call that commits them to one, either remote or in person, or a blended really, plan B or semester.
I agree with that 100%. That's kind of where I keep going back to live streaming things. What about the kid that's in the sky that has an autoimmune deficiency and can't do it? Would love to be there, wants the same opportunities that they're here, but not. So if we could live stream it, and they could get that same information that if they were playing B, that they can't do it, but you do.
Yeah, and that does make really good sense to me, particularly with high school courses.
Yeah, I think high school is the tougher of getting that equal playing field. Obviously, maybe even some middle school too, courses, you know, at least your
You got like
math
one.
ones and stuff like that. your
What
high
would it
school.
take in the classroom to live stream that? I mean, do we kind of,
It won't be a problem on this end. The problem could be on the end of the home where there might not be internet access. So one of the things that we did last year, you will recall, is offered students the opportunity to come and access what not come inside the building. And so there's some things like that that was looked at as well.
You can do a live stream with /record. You can stream it live, but also record it, so that they, maybe they can get access to the internet, to the library, or just. I know, like our company, well, I'm sure we're gonna do it again. We offer free Wi-Fi in our parking lot, and we're in Hereford. I'm sure other places around here have a library here, so they, maybe after hours, when the parents get in, they can ride them there, they can sit down, they can watch stream, live stream.
And we did that, the school system
We
offered
did
that
it
as
well.
well.
So, yeah, so they can get it.
But the critical piece is going to be getting that application out and getting some commitment from people, because, we're not asking everyone to fill out the application. We're only asking those who are interested in 100% remote learning to complete the application.
You need to make the board to make that happen, or you can just.
Well, ultimately, we're going to ask you all to approve our plan tonight, so that'll be.
be part of that?
So, but if we were, well, I mean, I guess the governor sees it, I'm here to say the same for your question. I guess I need to know. If they happen to get over, and he says we can return to plan A, then we got it. Correct? Do the people in plan C have to stick in plan C if we were allowed to do that?
Oh, no, we'd have to,
They have to
if we
say-
went back to plan A, if the governor moved us to plan A at any point, I feel like we would have to offer the people in plan C who self-selected that to come back to A.
And if by some miracle, we were granted a waiver to go to plan A? Same thing.
If we moved to plan A, I would think we would offer every person, every parent the opportunity to go one. But, and I guess that assumes that parents would choose option C over option B, but if option A were available, they would take option A.
You said option A still included the social distancing and mask anyway. With us being over capacity, we're still stuck, even if we had it.
Excellent.
I mean,
The
Excellent.
masks are, yeah, option A was never just everybody come back to school, don't worry about social distancing and don't worry about masks. That was never part of it. It was all 100% of students would come back, would be allowed to come back, but we would still have to do the social distancing and the cleaning and the providing of personal protective equipment and all that. Yes.
You could do social distancing.
No, you could not.
But
option A was one more thing.
Fun.
Well, unless they got a funny version.
Yeah.
We don't.
That's funny.
That's true. They did plenty of room.
Any other questions that I can answer?
class switching, and this might fall to you or Mr. Mizell. We got it from Grandy all the way to high school. If we're trying to be as clean as possible, does it make more sense for us to do teachers instead of students from class to class? Or how does that? I mean, if not, teachers are gonna be required to clean, I would think, the desks.
And we talked about that in our cabinet meeting, and Mr. Lawrence, he has some type of cleaning spray that the teacher would be able to spray on the desk, and then we'll be able to wipe that off before the next group of kids came in. So we discussed that already.
We discussed that with the consultant closed session.
I'm just curious, have you had any kind of staff survey? Curious.
No, the staff survey we're getting ready to do, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yes, and I don't know that we're necessarily going to do a survey, but we are going to ask our staff members if they require any accommodations to return to work. Really, we're just going to talk about the return dates for teachers, and then talk a little about the protocols that we're putting into place naturally, although most of our staff members are well aware of those things. And then determine which of our staff members require any accommodations to return to work. That may dictate some of the remote learning. When we discuss, say, if you have an elementary school teacher and 18 students, which 18 is 3 class sizes, then that works very easily. The likelihood is those numbers aren't going to jive quite that well, unfortunately, but it is important for us to know which of our staff members will require accommodations, be it minor accommodations or working remotely themselves, because that becomes incredibly challenging as we create a remote learning plan, particularly at the secondary levels where you have 3 math teachers to teach essentially 6 classes, I guess it is, Ms. Davis. So if one of those math teachers were to have a health condition that prevented them from coming to work, then the challenge would be how would we provide instruction for the students who have elected to come to school when we don't have enough teachers or the appropriate teacher to teach that class. We won't know that information without knowing and understanding the accommodations that teachers require. We have had, a teacher reach out, but we really need to reach out to the entire staff, and that's going to be done actually tomorrow via email, and then we'll send hard copies out. So if you're a staff member listening, surprise, you'll get an email from me tomorrow. And then we'll send hard copy letters for the staff members who aren't on this Facebook Live and don't know they're going to get an email tomorrow, so that they'll have that in the mail as well. But that's going to be woven into the remote learning plan because naturally,
Yeah. I think I was just
staffing,
wondering how that.
staffing is a big part of of how we would work this.
That answered it. Thank you.
We talked a lot about students, their well-being and health. That's because that's what we're here for. But I haven't heard very much, very spoken about our staff, our faculty, all of our members. They're very integral part of the education process too. So where are these plans? Does anything stand for?
As far as what DPI provided, there was not specifics, for staff. The only thing they talked about was providing expectations for our staff, but not the pieces that you're referring to, Mr. Howard.
So there hasn't been like increased emotional support for staff members and that obviously they're gonna have a tremendous amount of stress that's, it's gonna be different than any other school year. Some of the toolkit talking about cafeteria workers having to serve food and make sure they social distance. And different processes for even making sure that the children get their meals.
That is a conversation, that needs to be had, but in our form, in our guidebook, there is a social emotional that covers the staff as well. So that was just a big discussion, but in the big document, I think there is a letter about staff and supporting them as well.
And do you want to speak to screening of staff on a daily basis as well? So with regard to the health and safety of our staff, insofar as the virus is concerned, staff members will also be screened as they enter the building each day with temperature checks and really the same protocols that our students will follow, the staff members will follow those as well every day. Everyone from the principal to every teacher, custodian, staff member of the building will be screened as well. With regard to social and emotional, the employee assistance program still exists. We still provide that information to our staff. So each of our staff members is entitled to those 5 free and very confidential visits with a therapist or licensed professional if they choose. EAP is actually looking at expanding some things, and I'll get that information out to the staff as well. But yeah, those are certainly conversations we need to have because the social and emotional aspect of students is very important, but that is equally important for our staff because we have to take care of ourselves to take care of children.
And we will provide personal protective equipment to staff. The one thing that we have talked about multiple times is we have gotten, so far anyway, we have gotten very, very little guidance from DPI on how to handle staff members who are in at-risk categories, staff members who are caring for people or have people who are in at-risk categories living in their homes. What will happen with leave? One of the questions that has been asked multiple times that we don't have an answer to yet is if a staff member is asked to or needs to self-quarantine or contracts the virus, do they use their own leave? Are they given some additional leave? We don't have answers to any of that yet.
Does this not fall into like the CARES Act?
Well,
We don't have a great deal of guidance. The only answers we really do have now is there is still the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That still sort of falls under this umbrella. However, that's remarkably different than the state of emergency leave that was passed by the State Board of Education last year. There's been no indication, as Dr. Farrell said, to determine whether they're going to re-implement that leave in the fall and what criteria is necessary for that. Moreover, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, in that risk category, from a health standpoint, is not a qualifying factor to take that leave. In fact, having coronavirus is not a qualifying factor to take that leave, which I think that's more an oversight of those who passed the law in a very hasty fashion back in the spring. But caring for someone with coronavirus certainly is, but there are some differences in the leave that many of our employees utilized in the spring and the leave that's available to them now. And as Dr. Farrell said, there hasn't been a lot of talk as to whether or not they're going to re-implement that state of emergency leave, or if we're going to get some derivative of that in the fall. We really just don't have a lot of answers for that today.
What's the screening process, screening team, how's that gonna be composed? Everybody's gonna be overly burdened. Is that gonna be a volunteer effort, or certain people will be assigned? How many people are gonna participate in screenings so they can move in a fast, orderly fashion? Have we gotten that far yet?
One of the next steps that we're taking is to meet with principals. And Mr. Mazel, of course, was the representative for principals on the reentry team. Mr. Lazar obviously participated as whether it was honorary or otherwise on the remote learning team. But the next step for us is we have scheduled a meeting with them, and those are the kinds of questions that we have for them. Okay, Mr. Lazar, how are you going to handle that in your building? What do you think that's going to look like, Ms. Davis, at the high school?
One thing to think about too is alternating these people, so that just one person or 3 people don't have just that increased exposure every single day.
And it might very well, as I've said to multiple groups of people, it might very well involve some of us at the central office going out to support schools when those things are coming up in the morning. You know, we might a year where, particularly in the beginning, until we get into some kind of groove or flow, we're all going to have to do things that we might not have ever had to do before or thought we'd ever have to do. So it'll be, I mean, I never thought I'd be sitting in this room with a nurse walking over to me and saying, is it okay if I shoot your temperature? Absolutely. So, but, you know, it's a thing now. So we're going to have to step up and do some things.
Seriously, that would probably, if the cafeteria will be closed, how the process is gonna look as far as getting meals to students, or students are going to the cafeteria, what kind of meals are serving. So that's part of it.
That's our next steps.
Yeah, that is something that Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Lee have already started talking about. What do the bag lunches look like, or how do you get them quickly out of the classroom?
Thank you guys for all your hard work. Thank you very much.
Everybody's being,
And then I told you, if my arms were 6 feet long, I would have posted it. But no,
That's
it's
okay.
just,
So what we are, well, obviously, any other questions that you all have, we're happy to respond to. But what we're seeking tonight is approval to move forward with these 2 plans. With, obviously, there are some questions that you all have brought up tonight that I've written down inside these plans that we have to get answers to. But we need approval from you all to move forward with these sort of big picture plans so that we can start working with the principals to narrow it down to how are you going to implement this in your building? And start communicating with parents, which was a big part of why we wanted to come together tonight, so that we can get some information to them rather than having them wait over a week.
the superintendent has made a recommendation. Is there a motion?
What do we,
Can you repeat your recommendation?
start moving forward with still sweetness?
So there are a few things in here that you all have brought up tonight that we obviously need to address. I have to pull out a couple of examples that I'm sure you remember, like the new cough thing, for example. Does that remain as a standalone, or does that become part of another? And that's something that comes from the CDC or someone other than us, but we can find that out. But getting those things cleaned up overall, are you all happy with the direction of the plans so that we can start to hammer out some of the details like getting the survey done or the application done and going ahead and start working with principals to how the group or the screenings will work in the classrooms and that. Or do you prefer that we do some more work to address this and bring it back to you? But that, the only holdup with that would be I would not be comfortable until you all approved these plans, making them public. Completely public, where we're putting them in these hands.
So basically, what you're asking us to approve is, are we gonna do the blending of remote learning within the class instruction, or are we gonna do 100%?
So we have brought a plan to you to implement what the governor has decided. Now, you all have the 5 of you have the authority to say, thank you for bringing those plans to us. I appreciate your work. We're not doing that, but we're going to go to Plan C. You really don't have the authority to say, Mr. Attorney over there, you might want to help me with this, to say, well, we appreciate all your work, we're going with Plan A. So,
I wouldn't recommend.
I wouldn't. So that's what I'm asking, yes. Are you all want us to move forward with these plans, with the tweaks that you all have asked us to look at? And move forward with Plan B, as the governor has indicated? Or do you all make a different decision and say we're going to do Plan C? Or do you want us to work on some of the things that you brought up tonight and bring some answers back to you next week, at our meeting next week? And then seek approval of the plan that we present.
But in your perfect world, you really need an answer tonight.
I really need an answer yesterday, in a perfect world, because and that's not anyone's fault in this room.
No.
We are one step, I said this to one of you yesterday, I don't remember who it was now. We are one step ahead of whatever's chasing us at this point, and just trying to be ready for receiving our students back and being able to respond to the questions that we're going to get once we send this information out to our families. Yes.
Dr. Farrell, is it really 2 things we're asking, because the remote instruction plan is separate from Mr. Mizell, and that plan is due Monday,
It
and
is
so that
due.
plan is just an overall of what remote learning will look like, whether we're doing Plan B, C, or if you're 100% virtual.
I think that's a good point, and the answer to that is yes.
So that's due Monday.
The remote learning plan is due.
Does that lock us into how we're doing it? Like, yeah, no, it's not like a broken record. The whole live stream thing, like, we go to that house, like out the door.
No, that's not out the door. That can still be part of this.
Yes, and that plan that we're submitting Monday, just to be honest, is a checks and balance. So DPI just wants to ensure that every district is submitting a remote instruction plan. We still will have access to make changes as needed. And then in September or October at the General Assembly, they will make a presentation and they will say Camden County submitted their plan and just continue with all the districts.
We can still say our board meeting that for high school level classes, we want live streaming, bing, all week long, just continuing the process.
Well, that's what's going to be. Yeah, that can still happen. That's not necessarily in this plan. This is more, how did you describe the big picture?
Yes, sir.
And then when we start working with teachers and principals to be able to plan that, then that's when they will, that will be part of what they do as implementing this plan. So no, it's not gonna,
Let's see what we're locking ourselves into.
The remote instruction plan is not it's not locking you into anything.
It's
So
just the
if
plan
we go-
itself.
Right, so if you think back to the spring, we didn't have a plan
Yeah.
as far as attendance and grading and all of those things being consistent. So this will provide the structures and consistency for the entire district. But as far as the plan that Mr. Mizell presented, that's a separate.
One thing I'll add is whether y'all approve these plans tonight or you approve them next Thursday, something's gonna change. So,
Yeah,
And that-
presented tonight does not restrict us from retreating back to Plan C if that's what we decide next week, because something has gone wrong, they've had an outbreak, and, for whatever reason. But there's no other way for them to get started with the applications and the other things, the information you've asked for tonight without him having to release some of it publicly. And I understand the superintendent's concerned about not wanting to release it publicly if we haven't decided that's what we're gonna do. We can always get more restrictive, we just can't say we're going 100% virtual and then next week come back to them and say, never mind, scratch that, we need you to put this back on the table, so. Now, the virtual part of it, I make a motion we approve the virtual plan as presented by Ms. Anderson, so they get that into the state. That's just a big 15-item overall goal, it's not, the individual, with the caveat that can we have the individual schools maybe give us a more detailed assessment
Yes,
in
sir.
the August board meeting of how they're going to implement for each school?
I think that's better.
So you need to separate that recommendation.
No.
He just made two recommendations. So we have a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the remote learning plan as presented by Ms. Anderson.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Idler. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
So the other plan, does that really lock us in, even, or does he need some direction?
Well, the other plan locks us into doing option B, which is what the governor
That's
is.
what we're going to go into, obviously, start with parents and all that. Once we vote on it.
Right, and we have some details that we have to work through based on some of the questions that you asked and some of you all asked tonight, and some of the organizational and operational pieces of it. But the overall plan, if you approve it tonight, will be that the Camden County Schools is going with the governor's directive to do option or Plan B.
I'm torn. I know some parents want to answer, either back to school shopping, if that's what you have to do, is that time for sure, especially for like early college, they 2 weeks of it. So, get through that out. Like, start first.
Mr. Mizell, if I may, Mr. Chairman, speak briefly here. Which is more detrimental to you? If we vote to approve this as it's been presented tonight, and then next week tell you, no, we need to go to option C 100% online, or if we take no action tonight, and then next Thursday tell you we want to move forward with what you presented tonight, which one's going to put your group further behind on the returning to school piece that we've asked you to come up with?
Approval next week. If we get approval tonight, we can move on with, talking about buses, talking about classes, designing classes, and get staff in place to kind of identify which students will be 100% online.
And then if next week we need to say, we're all not comfortable, we're going to do 100% virtual for the first semester or whatever, you can regroup from that probably a lot easier than you can if you
Yes.
wait until next week.
Yes.
Well, the reality is if you all don't take any action tonight, we're still going to move forward planning. We will not necessarily be communicating it out, but we're still going to be ready, getting ready to implement what the governor has said we will be doing. And so, but then if you came back next week and said, we're going to go with Plan C, Camden County Schools, forever, how long we decide that. And we're just going to take the work we've done on that, put it on the shelf, and jump immediately to Plan C, which is really more about our teachers. And at this point, now that you've approved the remote instruction plan, is really more about our teachers and school-based administrators getting things ready for that to happen. And then we would just put this on the shelf for the work we've done and hold on to it for when B comes at some point.
that means it just happens.
Yes, it does.
I had to process it for a minute.
Okay.
It did, it sounded.
Okay. My brain is really full. So, I'm already, like, this year, I'm not doing it again, so. Took my hit with your turn.
Huh? I'm so busy. I work
But
a
I-
whole lot pretty.
Well,
It's got to look like I'm sitting in that class.
I am absolutely.
I'm torn, but I want them to at least have, they're gonna move forward regardless, but knowing we're, you know, I don't want there to be confusion among the academy staff and the teachers and the principals on what we're expecting. Tell them to move forward. Things can change. We may have to go back next week or in 2 weeks if, you know, things are different than they are tonight.
I think every day of face-to-face instruction is critical for our students.
Absolutely.
These are the best we got right now. I make a motion to.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Dr. Banks to go with the plan B as presented by the superintendent, seconded by Mr. Purcell. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? So we have 4 yes and 1 no. Motion passes. We've concluded all of the discussion that was on tonight's agenda, and we cannot discuss any more for those emergency call meetings, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Dr. Banks, seconded by Mr. Heath. To adjourn, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries, we adjourn. Sure, thank you.
Both streams.
I don't know.
What about that one?
So again,